Autumn in Maplewood, Ohio was Eleanor Parker's most beloved season. She woke up early every morning to tend to her backyard vegetable garden, and spent her afternoons volunteering at the neighborhood library. Her retirement life after 40 years as a librarian was more fulfilling than she had ever imagined. Eleanor's only son Brian worked as a middle manager at a local manufacturing company. He had inherited his mother's gentle nature, and while he wasn't particularly outstanding during his school years, he was earnest and responsible, earning the trust of his colleagues. His wife Michelle, whom he had married 5 years ago, had a bright and sociable personality. She was more outgoing than Brian and was often the center of attention at neighborhood ladies' lunches and school events. And then there was their son Tyler, who meant everything to Eleanor. He was an 8-year-old third grader who called his grandmother, Grandma Ellie, with affection. Tyler was a curious child who always wanted to learn new things. He loved reading and would become completely absorbed in the books that Eleanor borrowed from the library for him. Once a month, Eleanor made sure to invite Tyler to her home for quality time together. It was their special time from morning until evening, just the two of them. They would cook together, observe insects in the garden, and Eleanor would read him adventure novels from her youth. Tyler would always listen to his grandmother's stories with sparkling eyes, clapping his hands and exclaiming, "Grandma Ellie, that's amazing." Brian and Michelle also cherished the time Eleanor spent with Tyler. Michelle, in particular, expressed her gratitude. For Eleanor, her relationship with her son's family was ideal. Last month's time with Tyler was particularly memorable. The two of them went to a nearby park and collected autumn leaves to make pressed flowers. Tyler picked up colorful leaves and said, "Grandma Ellie, when I grow up, I want to travel the world with you." Eleanor squeezed her grandson's hand and smiled, "That sounds wonderful. But first, you need to study hard at school." Tyler was popular at school too. His grades were excellent, especially in language arts and science. He had many friends who often came to play at his house. Brian and Michelle watched their son's growth with pride. Neighbors often said, "The Parker boy is such a good child." The family of 3 lived in a new residential development about 15 minutes by car from Eleanor. While Brian's income wasn't particularly high, they lived a modest but happy life. On weekends, the family would go on picnics or invite Eleanor for dinner. Eleanor had been living alone since losing her husband 10 years ago, but having her son's family nearby meant she never felt lonely. Tyler's presence especially brought vitality and joy to her life. Watching her grandson grow was Eleanor's greatest pleasure. On a Tuesday morning in October, Eleanor was awakened by the sound of the telephone ringing. Looking at the clock, she saw it was 5:30 a.m. Phone calls at such an early hour were extremely rare. A bad feeling crossed her mind. She hurriedly got out of bed and headed to the living room phone. "Hello, Parker residence. Mom." It was Brian's voice. But it wasn't his usual gentle voice. It was trembling, as if he were crying. "Brian? What's wrong?" Eleanor's heart began to pound violently. "Mom, Tyler. Tyler was in an accident."
Can you imagine making $10,000 a month just from YouTube, all from home? That's exactly what I did with Reddit stories. No face, no voice. Check the link in the description if you're curious.
Accident. Is he hurt? Which hospital? I'll come right away, Eleanor replied frantically. Mom, listen. Tyler is already. Brian's voice broke off. Michelle's crying could be heard from the other end of the phone. What are you saying? Brian, speak clearly. Eleanor's hands began to shake. Tyler is dead, Mom. Last night, he was hit by a car. He was taken to the hospital, but it was too late. The strength drained from her hand holding the phone. A sensation of the world spinning overwhelmed her, and Eleanor collapsed onto the sofa. She couldn't breathe. Her chest hurt so much she thought her heart might have stopped. That can't be, that's impossible. Tyler was fine last night. You said he was working hard on his homework. Mom, you need to accept reality. Tyler is dead. He's never coming back. Brian's voice was filled with despair. Eleanor remained speechless for a while, still holding the phone. Her mind went blank, unable to think of anything. Tyler's smile appeared and disappeared repeatedly in her mind. The pressed flowers they made together last month. Grandma Ellie, when I grow up, I want to travel the world with you. Those sparkling eyes. Mom? Can you hear me? Brian's voice seemed to come from far away. Tell me the details. What happened? Eleanor finally managed to squeeze out her voice. Last night around 8 o'clock, Tyler was on his way home from a friend's house. When he was trying to cross Main Street, he was hit by a speeding car. The driver was drunk. He was immediately taken to the hospital by ambulance, but the head trauma was severe. Brian choked on his words. Tears overflowed from Eleanor's eyes. Imagining her beloved grandson lying alone on the road made her heart feel like it would burst. What about the driver? He was arrested. But that won't bring Tyler back. Are you at the hospital? I'm coming now. Mom, it's too late. Tyler is already. Brian broke down crying. Eleanor hung up the phone with trembling hands. Left alone in the living room, silence enveloped her. But that silence was more painful than any ear-piercing scream. She would never hear Tyler's voice again. Not his innocent laughter, nor his way of calling her Grandma Ellie. The next few days were like a nightmare. Eleanor rushed to her son's family and helped prepare for the funeral. Michelle kept crying, and Brian was completely exhausted. Neither of them was in a state to make proper decisions. Eleanor suppressed her own grief and busied herself for the family's sake. Meetings with the funeral home, processing death certificates, contacting insurance companies. Everything felt like mechanical work. It didn't feel real. It was as if she were watching someone else's life from the sidelines. The funeral home representative was a middle-aged man named Johnson. He wore a sympathetic expression and said, "I'm so sorry." At such a young age of 8. But to Eleanor, his words sounded hollow. Which casket would you prefer? Johnson spread out materials. Brian and Michelle couldn't decide anything. Eleanor chose it for them. A small white casket. It seemed too big for an 8-year-old child. Would you like to view the body? Johnson quietly asked. I want to see him, Eleanor answered. Mom, you shouldn't, Brian stopped her. The accident was terrible, his face. Eleanor followed her son's words. She couldn't see Tyler's face one last time. The funeral was held on Friday. The small church was packed with attendees. Tyler's classmates, school teachers, neighbors. Everyone loved Tyler. The pastor preached, God sometimes has plans that we cannot understand. But those words brought no comfort to Eleanor. A white casket was placed on the altar. She couldn't believe Tyler was sleeping inside it. Eleanor sat in the front row, continuously staring at the casket. She wanted to hear Tyler's voice just one more time. She wanted to see that smile just one more time. At the end of the funeral, attendees took turns placing flowers on the casket. When it was Eleanor's turn, she picked up a white rose. It was Tyler's favorite flower. As she quietly placed it on the casket, she spoke in her heart, Tyler, I will love you forever. Rest in peace. The burial ceremony at the cemetery was held in the rain. Cold rain wet the cheeks of the attendees. Eleanor stood in the rain, watching the small casket being lowered into the ground. This was truly goodbye to Tyler. She would never see him again. After the funeral, Eleanor had a meal with relatives and friends at Brian's house. But the food wouldn't go down her throat. The comforting words of people didn't reach her ears. She just wanted to go home quickly. She wanted to be alone and cry her heart out. When Eleanor returned home from the funeral, she opened the front door and sat down right on the floor. Still in her black dress, without even taking off her shoes. All the strength had drained from her body, making it difficult even to stand. The mask of strength she had worn all day finally fell away. The inside of the house was as quiet as death. Only the sound of the clock's hands marked a monotonous rhythm. Eleanor moved to the sofa and hugged a cushion. It was where Tyler always sat. She felt like his scent still lingered there. After 6 o'clock in the evening, it began to grow dim outside. October sunsets come early. Eleanor didn't have the energy to turn on the lights and sat quietly in the darkness. No more tears came. She had become empty. She thought she should go to the kitchen and eat something, but her feet wouldn't move. She had no appetite at all. She hadn't eaten properly for the past 3 days. But what did it matter? Tyler would never eat again. The clock struck 7. Eleanor finally stood up and took off her black dress, changing into house clothes. Her face in the mirror looked 10 years older than it had 3 days ago. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her cheeks were sunken. But she didn't care. Appearance didn't matter anymore. She headed to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. It was full of food. She had always kept Tyler's favorite foods ready for when he came to visit. Chocolate pudding, apple juice, small sandwich bread. All things that were no longer needed. Eleanor closed the refrigerator door and returned to the living room. Looking out the window, she saw street lights beginning to flicker on. The evening scenery that she would usually find beautiful now looked faded. It was as if all color had been drained from the world. Then, she heard a small sound from the direction of the front door. Something like footsteps, like something moving. Eleanor listened carefully. Was it the wind? Or perhaps a stray cat? But the sound continued. She felt like someone was outside. Eleanor stood up and headed to the front door. Before opening the door, she checked outside through the peephole. In the dim light of the street lamp, she could see a small shadow. It looked like a child's shadow. Her heart began to pound violently. "Who's there?" Eleanor called out with a trembling voice. "Grandma Ellie." The moment she heard that voice, Eleanor's world stopped. She must have misheard. That couldn't be possible. But that voice was unmistakably Tyler. Eleanor hurriedly removed the door chain and opened the door. Standing in front of the entrance was definitely Tyler. However, his appearance was tragic. His clothes were torn and muddy, his face and hands were dirty with soil. His hair was disheveled, and he was wearing only one shoe. He looked as if he had crawled out of the ground. "Tyler." Eleanor rubbed her eyes in disbelief. She thought she might be seeing a hallucination. "Grandma Ellie, help me," Tyler said with a trembling voice. His small body was shaking with fear. Eleanor knelt down to Tyler's level. She reached out and touched his cheek. It was cold, but he was definitely alive. She could feel his warm breath too. This wasn't a hallucination. It was real. "What happened?" "Tyler, you were supposed to be dead." Eleanor's voice was trembling. "Actually, Grandma Ellie." Tyler began to speak through tears. "I wasn't really dead. Daddy and Mommy tried to kill me, but they failed." "What are you saying?" Eleanor was confused. "I was put to sleep. They made me drink a strange medicine. But I didn't completely die. I woke up in the dirt." Tyler's voice shook with fear. Eleanor was speechless. If Tyler's words were true, then it meant Daddy and Mommy wanted my insurance money. They could get a lot of money, so they tried to kill me. But they got the amount of medicine wrong, and I didn't die. That can't be. Brian? Michelle? Eleanor couldn't believe it. Her own son trying to kill her grandson. It was very dark and scary in the dirt. But the casket lid was broken, and there was a gap. I desperately dug through the dirt and finally managed to get out, Tyler continued crying. Grandma Ellie, I was so scared. I thought I was going to die. Eleanor hugged Tyler. His small body was dirty with mud and sweat, but it was warm. He was alive. Her beloved grandson was alive. But at the same time, a terrifying truth was also revealed. I'm hungry. I haven't eaten anything for 3 days, Tyler said in a small voice. I'll make something for you right away, Eleanor stood up. But her legs were unsteady. The shock was so great that it didn't feel real. She brought Tyler inside the house and first gave him a warm bath. While washing away the mud, Eleanor checked to see if there were any injuries on his body. There were some scrapes, but no serious wounds. It was a miracle. She dressed the clean Tyler in fresh clothes and warmed soup in the kitchen. Tyler ate desperately. He was truly hungry. Grandma Ellie, what should I do? Tyler asked anxiously. It's okay. You're safe now. But we need to go to the police, Eleanor answered. Will they believe that Daddy and Mommy tried to kill me? I believe you. The fact that you're here is proof, Eleanor held Tyler's hand. But inwardly, she was confused. Did Brian really try to kill his son? That gentle son of hers. But the fact that Tyler was here couldn't be denied. Her grandson, who should have been buried at the funeral, was alive in front of her. Grandma Ellie, I don't want to go back to Daddy and Mommy anymore, Tyler said with a trembling voice. Of course not. I'll protect you. I'll never let you be in danger again, Eleanor promised. Outside, it had become completely dark. The town was quiet. Surely the townspeople thought Tyler Parker had been buried 3 days ago. No one would think he was alive. This was advantageous for them. Eleanor picked up the phone. She needed to contact the police. But would they believe her? Who would believe that a child who was supposed to be dead was alive? I'll call the police station, Eleanor told Tyler. But will they believe us? There was anxiety in Tyler's eyes. We have the truth. That's our strongest weapon. Eleanor went to the Maplewood police station with Tyler. Tyler gripped his grandmother's hand tightly. Under the fluorescent lights of the police station, the officer on duty looked sleepy. Excuse me, this is an emergency, Eleanor called out at the reception. What kind of matter is this? The officer looked up from his paperwork. Seeing Tyler, he frowned slightly. This child is my grandson, Tyler Parker. We held his funeral 3 days ago, but he was actually alive. This is an attempted murder case. The officer's expression changed. Confusion and doubt appeared on his face. I'm sorry, but what are you saying? Chief also attended young Parker's funeral. That's the problem. My son and daughter-in-law tried to kill my grandson for insurance money. But they failed, and Tyler crawled out of the dirt. Please wait, the officer disappeared into the back. After a while, Chief McBride appeared. When he saw Eleanor, he made a bitter face. Mrs. Parker, you seem tired. Having lost your beloved grandson, you're probably mentally disturbed. McBride's voice had a coldness disguised as sympathy. Chief, I'm perfectly sane. Look at this child. It's Tyler, Eleanor desperately pleaded. McBride glanced at Tyler but immediately looked away. This child certainly resembles Tyler, but he's probably a neighborhood child. Taking a child around at this hour of the night might constitute abuse. Abuse? What are you talking about? Eleanor was indignant. Mrs. Parker, your deep grief has made you unable to make normal judgments. Take this child home, and you should rest too. I recommend you receive counseling tomorrow. Tyler began to speak in a small voice. I really am Tyler Parker. Daddy's name is Brian, Mommy is Michelle. My birthday is April 15th, and my favorite food is Grandma Ellie's apple pie. But McBride wouldn't listen. Please leave. If you cause any more disturbance, we might have to arrest you. Eleanor was in despair. If the police wouldn't help, what could she do? She held Tyler's hand and left the police station. Grandma Ellie, the police don't believe us, Tyler said sadly. It's okay. There must be another way, Eleanor answered, but inwardly she was anxious. The next morning, Eleanor thought of a different approach. She decided to contact the medical examiner at the hospital. Eleanor visited the hospital and requested a meeting with her. Dr. Chen, I'm sorry to bother you when you're busy. I'm Eleanor Parker. Mrs. Parker. Oh, Tyler's grandmother. My condolences, Sarah's expression was serious. Actually, Tyler is alive, Eleanor got straight to the point. Sarah showed a surprised expression. What do you mean by that? Eleanor had brought Tyler with her. When Sarah saw him, her face changed color. Could it be? Doctor, have you noticed something? Eleanor felt hope. Sarah looked around and then lowered her voice. Actually, there were questions about Tyler's death certificate. The doctor who signed it was a non-existent person. But I was told to overlook it due to pressure from above. Pressure from above. From the police chief and the mayor. They said, the family wants it this way. But I thought it was strange. Sarah continued. Also, the photos from the accident scene didn't match the injuries listed on the death certificate. It said head trauma, but in the photos, there were no traces of external trauma. Why wasn't an autopsy performed? Eleanor asked. Because the family strongly refused. Brian and Michelle said they didn't want to make the child suffer anymore. But thinking about it now, that was probably part of the plan too. Sarah examined Tyler thoroughly. The traces of soil remaining on his body, the dirt under his nails, and above all, the consistency of his testimony. Everything supported his story. I can't believe it. You really were buried alive, Sarah said with a trembling voice. Doctor, the police wouldn't take us seriously. What should we do? Let's contact the state police. The local police may be corrupt. Also, we should probably report this to the FBI. Insurance fraud is a federal crime. With Sarah's cooperation, the situation progressed rapidly. State Police investigator James Ryder rushed over and listened to Tyler's testimony in detail. At the same time, FBI agent Angela Thompson also arrived. We have been investigating insurance fraud in this area for some time, Thompson explained. Brian Parker's company was heavily in debt and had made several suspicious insurance contracts. The investigation proceeded swiftly. First, they dug up the grave where Tyler had been buried. The casket was empty. The lid had been broken from the inside, and small handprints remained in the soil. Investigation of the funeral home revealed that Johnson had prepared a fake body. He had received $50,000 from Brian. The casket used was the cheapest Chinese-made one with weak fasteners. Moreover, it had been buried at only 3 feet deep instead of the usual 6 feet. We cut costs with shoddy work, Johnson confessed. I never thought the child was actually alive. Drug tests detected powerful sedatives in Tyler's body. While it wasn't a lethal dose, it was normally enough to cause unconsciousness for several hours. However, Tyler's small build and the adrenaline released from fear had weakened the drug's effects. The arrest of Brian and Michelle was dramatic. The two were in the process of receiving insurance money and had already received part of it. Their alibis also crumbled one after another. The son had significant debts, Thompson explained. He was on the verge of bankruptcy due to gambling and failed stock investments. Tyler's $5 million life insurance was what he saw as the only solution. Police Chief McBride was also arrested. He had received $100,000 from Brian and obstructed the investigation. The mayor was also suspected of involvement, and the entire town was shaken by a major corruption scandal. Local newspaper reporter Michael Davis had been pursuing the irregularities of Brian's company for some time. His articles made the case national news. Headlines reading, "Miraculous Survival, 8-year-old boy exposes insurance murder," appeared in newspapers across America. Tyler's testimony became decisive evidence in the trial. He bravely told the truth in court. Eleanor watched her grandson from the gallery and was proud of his courage. The verdict was harsh. Brian received 25 years for attempted murder, insurance fraud, and child abuse. Michelle received 20 years as an accomplice. McBride got 15 years for bribery and obstruction of justice. Funeral director Johnson also received a 10-year prison sentence for aiding fraud. Justice has prevailed, Eleanor hugged Tyler outside the courthouse. "Grandma Ellie, we can be together forever now," Tyler said happily. "Of course. We'll never be apart again," Eleanor promised. The case shocked the entire nation and led to reforms in the insurance industry. A new system to monitor corruption in local police was also introduced. The town of Maplewood was deeply wounded, but with the truth revealed, it slowly began the healing process. A year later, Eleanor and Tyler had moved to a small town called Greenville, 2 hours by car from Maplewood. Their new home was a small cottage by a lake, much smaller than their previous house, but it was enough for the two of them. Most importantly, there were no sad memories from the past here. Tyler had transferred to the local elementary school and was making a fresh start as a 4th grader. During the first few months, he often woke up from nightmares in the middle of the night, but with the help of a professional counselor, he was gradually recovering. He had made new friends at school and had become particularly close to a girl in his class named Emily. "Grandma Ellie, today at school, the teacher praised my composition," Tyler reported while helping prepare dinner. "Really? What kind of composition did you write?" Eleanor asked with a smile. "The theme was My Hero, and I wrote about Grandma Ellie. The world's strongest and kindest grandmother who protected me." Tears welled up in Eleanor's eyes. For the past year, she had desperately tried to restore Tyler's smile. Sometimes she wasn't sure if she was making the right choices. But seeing Tyler now, it felt like everything had been worthwhile. Through legal proceedings, Eleanor had officially become Tyler's legal guardian. Brian and Michelle were serving their sentences and had been stripped of visitation rights. Tyler himself said he never wanted to see them again. For Eleanor, this was also sad. Brian had been her son, after all. But Tyler's safety and happiness took priority above all else. After the incident, many letters and donations arrived from across the country. They came from people moved by Tyler's brave testimony and his grandmother's love. Among them were words of encouragement from families who had experienced similar difficulties. Eleanor was deeply moved to learn that their experience had become a source of hope for others. The neighbors also warmly welcomed the two of them. The Joneses, who lived next door, were a couple in their 70s who cherished Tyler like their own grandson. Mr. Jones was a former teacher and sometimes helped Tyler with his homework. "Eleanor, you're a wonderful grandmother," Mrs. Jones said while drinking tea. "Looking at that child, you can clearly see he's being raised with love." "On the contrary, I'm learning a lot from Tyler," Eleanor replied. "His strength and positive attitude always amaze me." Tyler was indeed strong. Despite that terrifying experience, he hadn't given up on trusting people. He truly trusted his new school teachers and friends, living each day to the fullest. Sometimes Eleanor found herself gaining courage from her grandson. On weekends, the two would walk by the lakeside or go to the library. Tyler still loved reading and was absorbed in adventure novels. Sometimes they cooked together or grew vegetables in the garden. Each ordinary moment of daily life was a precious treasure for both of them. On the anniversary of the incident, a year later, the two sat on a bench by the lake watching the sunset. The orange sky reflected on the lake's surface, creating a beautiful scene. "Grandma Ellie, I'm happy," Tyler said quietly. "So am I." "Because you're here with me," Eleanor put her arm around Tyler's shoulder. "I'm really glad I was able to get out of that dirt back then. If I had died then, I wouldn't have been able to be with Grandma Ellie. But you were alive. That's what matters most. Right. We're a real family, aren't we?" Tyler looked up and said, "There are things more important than blood ties. That's love and trust. We have that, so we're a real family." The sound of birds could be heard from across the lake, as if announcing the beginning of a new day. Eleanor and Tyler walked home hand in hand. Tomorrow, they would create new memories together again. In the town, various reforms had been implemented following the incident. Strengthening of child protection systems, improvement of insurance industry oversight, introduction of external audit systems for local police. Tyler's brave testimony had brought about many changes. Eleanor sometimes thinks that life can bring unexpected trials. But if you have the desire to protect those you love, you can overcome any difficulty. And a real family is not about blood relations, but bonds connected by caring hearts. The evenings in Greenville were peaceful and beautiful. Eleanor and Tyler's new life continued quietly but surely forward.